There we go. So as you heard all, we are recording now this session 4 on open data. We are starting the topic of open data today with Isil. Again, I just want to remind you that the call is being recorded and transcribed, and that means that you will be able to go back to it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. It is all the links are there in our shared document. I also wanted to remind you that we are working under the OLS Code of Conduct. It is also linked there in the Framapat, but you can also have a look in here in the chat. Mostly, we are just friendly people. We try to be as patient as we can, be welcoming, considerate. So all the essentials that are important to have a nice discussion. We will have a couple of discussions today in the breakout room. You do have a reminder of the guidelines in the shared document as well. But I just want to remind you, please rename yourselves with a W or an S, depending if your preference is to participate by writing or by speaking, and we will make up the breakout rooms in according to that. Don't forget to just do a brief introduction of yourself on whatever way you'd like to be known by your group. To be kind, of course, speak a bit slower. I always tend to speak quite faster when I'm doing these calls. So again, don't hesitate to raise your hands. And if I'm mispronouncing something or you're not understanding me, sometimes I'm making it very hard. And yeah, please don't be shy. Just clarify any questions, offer suggestions, affirmations. We are all here to learn and to contribute to each other's journey. I'm just going through my list of reminders. Yes, breakout room are there. I think I'm seeing most of the letters already. Thank you, everyone. And before handing over to Isil, I just want to do a couple of general reminders. Coaching sessions. You people have access to amazing experts and coaches, and you just need to sign up in the link that I'm going to share now. It is also in the Slack, in email. You should have received it in different ways. The only requirement is that you filled in the template with a bit of your answer to the questions, and then experts will be there to offer their help, basically. We do ask, if you cannot come, please let us know, because these people, these experts and coaches, are coming to these sessions just for you. So just let's be mindful of their time as well. I am also going to post, and I'll remind you by the end, I know that we are only week 2, but we are, as I said, we are all here to learn. And one of the ways that OLS tries to keep up with the materials, with the ways that we work, is by asking feedback and listening the participants, and that's you. So we have this mid-program survey, very chilled, very simple. If you can just let us know, how are you finding it until now? What can be improved? What is going wrong? What is going great? So we can, adapt the rest of the program. And then next week, you will be receiving an email about the process for requesting the microgrants to those who have already requested them. So we have already finished in the process. And also I will be sending some graduation requirements as well. So you keep them in mind for whatever is left of the program. And with that, I'm just going to shut up and hand over to Isil. The slides that she's going to prepare are already openly available on Zenodo, and again, they are linked in the Framapat. But yeah, we can enjoy the session for now with her. Thank you, Isil.
Thank you so much for all those nice introductions, and it's super excited to be a part of this cohort this year. And I have been in your space once. I have been also back in time as joined OLS community as a mentee to develop one of my first initiative projects, and I really enjoyed all the interactions and expert knowledge and the community, feeling like when you go through a lot of like hardships with your projects and know that you're surrounded by amazing, first friendly and welcoming community, and also the experts full of already a lot of experiences to share with you. It just feels like you're not alone. You feel like supported. You feel like you heard. And it's just for that reason, I am sure you all feel super happy to be part of. Hopefully you all feel the same way I felt. And now I've been back as a mentor, and now I am happy to just share my what I've learned through this time with you. So just introduce myself. I'm Işıl Poyraz-Bilgin. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Montreal and Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, in the US. Currently, I'm localized in Montreal. And I work with understanding human brain using artificial intelligence models to work with mass and open brain data as much as we can find to train those models. And as today we're going to discuss about the open data and fair principles, of course, in my field also it's such an important topic, especially when you need to work with mass amount of data. And also considering this is a little bit medical data, that it comes with a lot of considerations around it. So we will hopefully have a little bit of touch on that too. So I am hoping that you see my slides well. So okay, so if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to write in the chat. We will try to address as much as possible. As I had mentioned, like we will have breakout rooms to discuss a little bit further the in between us. So and this is more interactive than just me like talking. And I would love to hear your suggestions or ideas, because open science is based on the community's involvements, and as much as interactions we have, as much as we hear about the example struggles all around the world and the different kind of fields, this open science practices are more prone to be able to develop in this, as corresponding well to the needs of everyone. So before we go to the today's lecture, so I just want to give you a little bit of like outline. So first, I'm going to give a little bit introduction to what do we mean by open data, what exactly is concepts and what it covers and what we refer to, and then we will move on to talk about the FAIR principles. It will make sense when we go into details of what do we mean by FAIR exactly. And then if you have time, I will move on to a little bit further extension that how do we use an open data? How do we make our data open, or how do we share, and what tools are available to use open data? So before we move on, let's first discuss what do we mean, like what is data exactly for us? So obviously, data is any kind of information that is collected, observed, or created in the context of research is data, especially in today's world. When we say data, it's mostly at the moment is electronic or digitalized, but still we some of us work with also the data that is on the more like a documentation or paper like level. But most of the time, and for the sake of also rigorous and reproducible scientific practices, of course, we encourage to move to the more digitalized formatting our data. So data comes with different levels of accessibility. So when we collect the data, this first stage of the data is like we can call it as a primary or raw data, which means that the data is collected as it is, and we still don't have any processing done. So it has all the faults or artifacts or all the noise in it. Of course, using this data comes with cost. So that's why the secondary level of data is usually we do some further processing to get out of these noise or outliers or unnecessary or the bits and pieces to make data more compact. And once we have this clean data, we put more efforts into that, and we do further level analysis, and then we get some statistical results or maybe some publishable results. Then at this stage, the data becomes like published data. And and we will talk more in detail. Like data also sometimes comes with, or it just itself becomes like a metadata, which is like a more summarized version of the supportive data that gives more information about the data itself. So okay, so this is data, but what do we mean by open data? So open data, in a most simplistic definition, that is the data that can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone. So what it can be, so open data could be any the notebooks that you keep taking a note of the whole process of collecting data. It might be the outputs of preliminary analysis. It might be code. It might be instructions. It might be the experiments the executed. So it might be draft of scientific papers or any kind of research plans and management documents. Like it can be anything that you think that might be useful for others to share this experience with. That thing becomes the data, and when you share, it becomes like open data. So this is the like most let's say basic definition of open data, but we would like to first hear to understand like what when we talk about open data, what comes into your mind as first, then we move on with further. So I would like you to like use the from a pad, and we will, I guess, split you into those groups based on your preferences, or either speak or the written format. And we would like you to discuss in between what exactly, when you hear about open data, what it refers to, what do you mean for you, or what it should be, what's your expectations from a data being open. So I guess this is a 5-minute kind of interaction.
Yes, I'm going to pause the recording and open the rooms. 1 second.
Good.
There we go. Welcome back. Are we all here now? Yes, we are. Welcome. Does anyone want to share their discussions, learnings, doubts?
Each group could have one brave soul coming up, unmuting themselves and sharing their perspectives with us. Or you could also drop it in a chat. Either of it is perfectly fine. It's great to see breakout room 1 and the notes are there. And I'll try one more time dropping it in the chat from a pad link, so every one of us could take a look and fill out the section in there, which is around line number 89. It starts with the prompt, and it would be lovely to see your written comments there, and we also get to record it and understand your perspective.
We'll just stay here a bit in awkward silence because I see a lot of typing. But yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves and just give us your perspectives if that's easier.
Okay, I see the action happening still, so
yes.
Hi.
So I'm going to say one key thing about open data that I find useful and why it's important is it gives you access to a whole large volume of data that you otherwise wouldn't be able to access. And like Olushala already stated, I was in group 1, so like she already stated, you don't have to travel. Research requires you, depending on the context and the focus of your research, it requires you traveling. So it saves you that journey of traveling from one location to the other. It gives you a broader perspective of what is happening out there because you can access research from different locations, just being where you are. So you can carry out a secondary data analysis or a secondary, you learn about research methods and principles and things happening in locations divergent to where you are or what you are used to. So there's a whole lot of benefit to it.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, exactly.
And I love your addition to that. You do not have to travel, but you have an access which is broad enough.
Hmm.
Not only start working on it, but have a comprehensive understanding beyond the particular research work that you are doing, and it only comes when it's open.
Yeah.
There is no other way that will appear. That's lovely insight.
Thanks.
We are still keen to listen from you, so if you would love to come unmute and share.
Hello, everyone. My
Hey.
group was Alan and Mika. I'm sorry if I misspelled it, and me, Andrea. We are from different sciences, so it was actually really fun to me. I spoke from my perspective from public health, that in Brazil we have DataSUS, that's a big collection of billions of lines on public health, basically everything that happens in the country, public health, and how it gives accountability and trust to the research that we do. Even though it's anonymized, the data, but you can still do some ecological research on this and financial as well. And my friend Emeka, Alan, I think it's Alan, he creates electricity grid. I think he could explain better to me because not my area. But he opens his data on research, and it facilitates collaboration, connection with people that interested on this kind of research. That was the take that we had. Thank you.
Thanks, Answer. That's beautiful.
Yeah, excellent.
It's so lovely that data is just not like a field. It's so diverse. It's so colorful. It goes beyond reaches, measures, geography, demography, and yeah, I love to look at it every single day. Weird stuff. It's fun to play around and make stats. Some of the key words that I'm able to read from the farmer pad are accountability, innovation, the idea that how perhaps also LLMs and models can be trained on that data. Surely we have been seeing a surge of it, a lot of it around it. And without that, probably these LLMs would not be as quickly getting to a pace which they are able to right now. So, yeah, it is aiding the scientific discovery and launch of advanced modeling out there for sure. And I love the insight on the electrical grid, which is definitely a very good insight, and also public health, as Andre mentioned rightly about decision making, transparency, and creativity. That I think is one of the key essential bits of creativity only comes with the level of freedom that open data brings to the platform. It would be extremely difficult if that's not there. Wow, that's beautiful. And every breakout room that I see has come out with insights of perspective to their domain and also combining it with their experiences. Thanks everyone for bringing those insights here today.
Yes, thanks, Simon. These are almost more or less covers my next slides, but I'm just keeping quiet to maybe comment through that. But these are, you already are ahead of me to say everything you knew this anyway. So shall we move on, or are we good? Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for all these amazing ideas. And indeed, this is exactly what we wanted to hear from you. And this is more or less like indeed why exactly we need open data. So it's open data is one of the most integral part of the open science to make it move beyond just through the those closed publications and but to more to encourage to disseminate research outputs, because when we do that, it provides, as you already mentioned, like greater transparency, accountability to be to drive the innovation and growth, and also so oh sorry here we also open data help us to create any decisions as based on more joined up efforts, because when we access the open data, it's not the open data itself. We also have the open data allows us to have an access to those other practices by deployed by other communities, other research labs or other research domain. It's just suddenly gives us a better outlook than the particular thing that we are so focused on. Because sometimes when we work in our own field, we become very narrow focused. We only think that what exists is just exists in our own field or the own way of thing, but there might be a better way or different way of thing in another domain or another lab or another research community, which might be pretty transferable and even might be provide some answers to your own questions or the own way of struggle. So that's why it helps a lot of flexibility in that sense to help you to resolve your points where you stagger, as well as also it gives you the same way they contribute towards those communities' efforts. Like when you know the data, when you have a better idea that what do they do, you can also push them back with some sort of other ideas or other ways of looking at their data or analyzing the data. So it's always reciprocal, and who share the data also share with this expectation as well. Like they would like to be acknowledged and know that how this data is useful. And sometimes also depends on the field, the data is sparse. Like for example, if you in my domain, if you work with patients, usually the neuroimaging data with patients are not easy to collect. We have 10 subjects here, 4 subjects in another institute. Some of them can complete some sessions, but not all, and some of them cannot complete one of the imaging session, but cannot do the other complying other tasks to do because of their illnesses or some things get in the way. It's hard to expect them to contribute everything like healthy subjects, and then data becomes super sparse, and sometimes even this sparsity get in the way that the way that you want to analyze the data. But if another lab or another hospital or another research agency share your data, then you can populate your data better to run your analysis or hypothesis and to reach to the point where you want to reach with your research questions. So that's why, again, also when you focus on a very narrow field and very narrow community or very narrow data samples, it's kind of biased the way that you can make a generalization about your understanding about the data. That's why it's always good to expose yourself with other data and contribute. It's not just the take, but also to contribute back to what this data offers to the both provider, but also from your user perspective. So this is all amazing part of we keep talking about open data, but what open data should look like what it should provide to us. It's not just we dump a data set in a repository and leave it and we call it open data. So it should provide some sort of facilitation around it, so we can fully benefit from it. So the first thing that we would expect on open data to have that it comes with some sort of easy facility to obtain and manipulate it. So it should be to be able to have this operability on the data set, that it should be coming with some sort of documentation around it. So because sometimes the data comes with various formats, and you need to understand in what data frame has what kind of information in it, what are those subjects. Let's say if you work with human subjects or animal subjects, you want to understand what exactly the demographic of those subjects, or where the data is collected, when it is collected. You need all these informations. Who collected this data? Who are the funding agencies? Like, is there any publication about this data, so you can already have a preliminary idea about what this data telling us all about. So all these aspects usually provided with these accompanied files that we call either metadata or documentation. So if you have these, your job becomes more easier than just having the data itself and spend days and hours to understand what this data is all about and how you can operate on it. So, and of course, we're gonna talk in more detail. I believe during this cohort, you're gonna hear this many times, that to be able to use the data, it should also come with some sort of licensing agreement. That license tells you that under the protection of law agreements, what are my rights to use this data? Yes, I can download it, but can I manipulate it? Can I run whole pipeline of analysis, and can I publish it? Can I make those any changes in the data? So all these are defined by the owners of the data by wrapped around this documents we call licenses. And also this license tells you about the copyrights, comes with the data. And also when we use the data, we also, the courtesy and the best practice is always to cite the data, because first, it's important to acknowledge who put all the efforts, money, all the pipelines around collecting, making the data available, and sharing and sustaining, maintaining of this data. But also, as your further outputs on this data, when you share your further outputs with this data, you also would like to tell your next users or next audience that where exactly the source of data comes from. That's why citation is super important and needs to be provided by the whoever shares the data. Of course, the data is usually shared in various platforms and storage or repositories. It comes with also some sort of different kind of needs of accessing to the data. So some repositories comes with you need to be members, you need to apply with some institutional long processes, or sometimes it's just there, you just click and download. But these informations need to be also provided for you so you know that what to expect during the application or downloading or getting this data processes. It should be findable in an accredited and trustworthy resources. So, usually our old way of doing is putting a flash disk and share between our colleagues, but it's always prone to a lot of errors and losing the data, losing some part of the data. So that's why we want, and we encourage people to use those platforms already exist there to upload their data with all this necessary supplementary information. So it's there, it's open and trustworthy. It's maybe maintained by some other organizations in the best way. And it gives you the grant that your data will, as it's possible that you want it to be there. And one of the important thing that versioning, like what happened to this data before you access to it, like when it is collected, what kind of operations it's gone through. Is it a raw data, or it's gone through any kind of pre-processing, any changes, any new updates of new cohort of data? So you would like to know that this kind of change happen on the data. That's why it's very important to have those kind of versionings comes with the data. So, so the next thing we will talk about a little bit, like what barriers we face with when we access the data. Yes, now we are convinced that open data is useful for us. And now we know that there are some existing open data out there. We want to start investigating and accessing to them. But from your like experiences, we want to hear a little bit like what has been the most difficult or challenging part of the accessing an open data. So I guess this one will be like not in the breakout rooms, but we will be more like discussing. We would like to hear from you, like you can either unmute yourself or use the from a pad to start writing there about your experiences so far, what got in the way that when you wanted to use the data, but it was not that easy in the way that some things was not available or confusing. The process was confusing. So we can, if anyone wants to share ideas, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself, or we can just go back to from pad and see what you would like to share with us regarding that. I guess this is for 5 minutes, right? So we will just get back.
Just to have some ideas and discussions kind of chiming in this point. The challenges, as I rightly mentioned, it could be missing, it could be confusing, a bit part of it, it could be a process that is too complicated or non-comprehensive in the way you want to reach. All of these would aid to this prompt, like what was the challenge? And it doesn't have to be an industrial level challenge. It could be something you personally faced in accessing those units. And I think I could also add something. I learned about license after facing one of these channels. Like I was using a data set which was AGPL, which essentially means that it is for corporates and you cannot reproduce it, you cannot share it, or you cannot build on top of it. And you might find that licensing very commonly used around.
True. Yeah, true.
And that was a learning for me. I go for Apache 2 and MIT, that those are the two really beautiful ones that I keep looking now and put my eyes on, like, this is what I'm looking for. I would love to have those. Else, it gets really tricky. And looking at my SBOMs, like software material bill of bills, now I could really see how licensing plays a very important role, and it's also a challenging bit there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you ever collected your own data. Like I definitely empathize with all the effort that goes into data collection. I'm sure you have ideas like this, how hard to like bring all the fundings and like facilities and persuade your superiors and find the good resources and tools or subjects and bring all them together, how long it takes. And then of course after all these efforts, sometimes it's a big hesitation to know that at which point that you should share your data and how much intelligent rights that you want to preserve and how much you want to give away. Like the licensing a little bit provides that, but of course this comes with a lot of challenges for the second users of the data. So it's just puts you in a little bit like a difficulty in understanding. And also the license can be changed the way the funding agencies who fund you or in your institutions requires this data to be used. Like so it's yes, provides just yet another barrier of manipulating or any certain following operations they can run on the data. Sometimes, the most of the time, what I encounter is, yes, data is there, but unfortunately some part is missing. Like some information is incomplete, or like it takes so much time to get into, or sometimes they are formatted in a way that you can't even open them, or you need their own tools to open them, because they formatted or used in a way they can. Oh, is this the song from?
Wow, that is a
That was
timer.
the timer for thinking. Sorry, it's always like this
It sounded like a star of a
picturesque
Disney
soundtrack.
movie. That's so nice. Okay, I guess we
Sorry.
have a good amount of things.
Oh, lovely. So amazing insights coming in, and I would love to read them out. But before I do that, if anyone would want to unmute themselves here and take the opportunity to share their views.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
I'm
Hey,
Sega here from Nairobi, and I think for me it was sometime last year when we were trying to publish some data, and the biggest challenge was just the volume of it. So we got these file sizes of, let me say, 10, 20 GB, and publishing that and even running it on a local computer was just massive and could crash. So we had to break it down into different chunks. So I'd say size is one, different formats is another. So one time you're working with TXT file, the next you're working on a Parquet, the next time you're working on a CSV. So just different formats and sizing as well.
So true.
thanks for sharing, Ellen. Definitely, volume without an infrastructure could really be a bottleneck in order to scale those data environments in. I see unmutes, so please go ahead. Do not have to wait.
Okay. Hi, I'm Zozana AB. So my primary research field has been mostly based in Nigeria, even though I'm based in the UK. Um, One of the greatest challenges I've faced is the fact that there are lots of universities in Nigeria, there are lots of researchers in Nigeria, and they do write and publish. But there's this limitation in their ability to access foreign-based journals due to criteria that have been put in place due to the financial cost of publishing with these journals. So those data don't get circulated. Most times you find them in local journals, but those local journals are not even readily accessible. They are not online. So if there's this awareness of open science and the ability to publish in sites that are free and easy to access, we will have this data out there for other researchers to build on, not just assessing, but to build on and have a clear conceptual understanding of what is happening in specific fields within that domain. So even as a researcher here, there are lots of journals you want to access, and then you have to pay for them. If you don't pay for them, you can't access them. If you're not based within any specific university, then that is another challenge in itself. So as an, will I say, as an independent researcher, you find that as a problem in again. So those are the two things I wanted to share.
I guess publication venues are a like universal problem. We all challenge in the way that they execute scientific practices, and yeah, they charge to the researchers and whoever wants to access the information that is produced. With the public funding, it's protected under private companies, like handling your own intelligent rights, and they claim to own it. Yeah, this is always a big problem from every. And about the previous point, indeed, like sometimes we don't even become that considerate that when we pack the data together, we rely on or on like we think that everyone has the same kind of internet access or everyone has same sort of facilities that they can download maybe the data in one go, but it's not possible because of the like the recipients might not have the same technological capabilities or facilities as, and yeah, it's always a I mean, yes, we are very well intentioned and we really want to make things work, but we miss those points because it's like we always like confined in our mind the way that how things works for us. It's super. It's not from the any malicious ideas or the way that we want to do it, but it's just like again, this is one of the most fantastic part of the open science. Like when we collaborate or when we hear those feedbacks, then it makes us to think again, like whether the practices that we use is accessible by everyone. Like not necessarily we are indeed in comply with these aspects, and super important. But yeah, publication menus is yet another big part of the pain in the whole academic field itself.
And the discussions really help to just understand that this entire ecosystem still has a lot of bottlenecks and challenges that as we individuals in the field of open science could together tackle and produce solutions perhaps and make it more accessible to one and all. Few of the key summary items that I could just point out here is definitely accessibility. The localization practices, the ability to have it decentralized in different regions is something which needs work still. It's not yet there for everyone. Domain challenges, not all kinds of data can be reaching to all different types of demographics depending on the different compliances out there. Restructuring of the data, perhaps, and cleaning in multiple sources, it's also one of the challenges that Samuel mentions here. Lovely. And overall, we do understand that irrespective of the work that has been done, there could be done more. There is a possibility to do more. Thanks for sharing, everyone. Moving on to our session.
So thank you again sharing all these insights. Like, oh, sorry, I did that. That's indeed taps into very important parts that every single thing you wrote is exactly the day-to-day challenges we all encounter when it comes to the joy of using open data. So the couple of other things I can also add on top of those points you mentioned that so from the point of making your data open, so it requires a lot of planning that needs to put together because of the as you might understood already, like I've seen already, like collecting the data is a big chunk of the work anyways, and then putting in some particular format that is as we were discussing, like can make this data accessible for any possible scenario. People or researchers come with any possible scenarios or use needs or facilities they have back at home, and structuring the data in a format that can be readable, machine readable, human readable, understandable, easily accessible, requires a lot of like efforts to put together. All these stays, of course, requires a good planning ahead, so you don't, obviously along the way you always encounter with challenges here and there, but at least you have a good understanding of what you expect along the way. but also the using appropriate tools. Like some fields, some domains are more prone to using some kind of structured data. For again, from my domain, we work with brain data, and in certain every single MR scanner that where we collect the human brain data, or EEG, like electrodes data collection methods. Unfortunately, because they are proprietary companies who produce all these amazing machines, but they come with their own data format. So we can't, if we share my data as it is, it will not be easy for someone else to read back at home. So that's why we have to put it all this data in a unified format. It of course requires a lot of work and so also the knowledge to be able to do this. So that is always it's one level of challenge. It's not impossible, but always it's one layer more to make the data as quickly as possible accessible online. Some of the data, unfortunately, is super sensitive. Like, of course, we would like to share all these data, but sometimes it might, back in the time, came with some kind of events that the data might have been used against some sort of communities and marginalized. Some communities has been marginalized because they have been like misinterpreted, misused. This is always also like some sort of concerns comes with having all the data out there possibly accessible. Again, if you don't share your data with some sort of licensing, you also has been unfortunately your data is prone to being scooped out before you even maybe publish your own results. And of course, again, like some data is, some of you mentioned before, quite sensitive data. So it might contain some sort of security information, some military information, as we said, the medical information. So you need to know exactly like use the good methods and tools out there to make sure your data is anonymized or cleaned enough, so you're not giving away any kind of data that might later on cause any kind of harm to the subjects or the institution who collected the data. Of course, these challenges out there, but they are not unsolvable. So for this case, I guess we can discuss like now go to these principles, which is there to actually more or less to answer some of our concerns. So what is FAIR principles? So the FAIR principles is a set of principles. They are not rules, they are not laws, but they are principles that are agreed universally to by all these researchers spending years of experiences, times, and gaining experiences on handling a lot of different kinds of data and coming to some sort of consensus that there are some best practices to handle the data or software to facilitate their accessibility, their discovery by the second users. It's again, it's not like rule, it's not like law, it's not standard, but it's kind of consensus or convention that eventually we all came up to agreeing on to that. We think that it helps science to move or evolve better if you share the data following those rules or principles. So FAIR is an acronym of 4 words. Now I will try to give a little bit like sense what exactly it refers to. So the first concept is findable. What we refer with this, like when you share your data, of course, you would like your data can be discovered by others easily. What does that mean? Like your data and results would be assigned with a globally unique and persistent identifier. And it comes with a description of which describe in the good and most possible way. So using or creating a metadata around your data. It includes all the identifiers of the data. It helps the second user to understand what exactly inside the data, how it is collected, what kind of process it's gone through. Like it's kind of gives all the clear information. Even before I decide whether this data is useful for me or not, metadata always helps to do the first screening about to understand what's inside the data. And it's one of the most important practices that your data and results are registered or indexed with a searchable resource. What does that mean? So usually the best practices is like use the persistent identifiers. They come in several various ways, but one of the most used you might have seen when you look for a publication, they always have a DOI, like digital object identifier. It's like some produced kind of information that is unique to your own outputs out there. Or you can use open research and contributor ID, which you might have this already. You registered with this platform, you have your unique ID even for yourself. It's called ORCID. It produces a code that uniquely, again, identifies yourself as an author, but also your research products. So when you share a data, if you share with this unique ID, it makes anyone or any kind of search algorithms to easily find this data and that is unique to your own shared data. So the first principle, then provide as much as kind of information or digitalize these identifiers with your data so you can make them easily findable through all these today's technologies like searches through the search engines. And the second part, our second concept comes with the FAIR principles is accessibility. So you want your data can be made available to others. So data and results are retrievable by their identifiers through these standardized communication protocols. So which means like if you're using those DOIs, so it would be easily identifiable. And this protocol is usually should be open, free, and universally implementable. Not that something you came up with only means something to you, but it's universally agreed and is a good practice. And the protocol allows for an authentication and authorization procedure where necessary. So maybe if your data needs to follow some sort of, if you put your data or outputs into a platform to make it accessible, sometimes those platforms, as we mentioned before, might come with some sort of accessing procedures that you have to follow through. Rather than just click and download. So you might know that these are also not too complicated to make whole process painful and unnecessarily complicated for others. And of course, the data and results are publicly accessible and licensed under public domain, which helps others to understand, again, like the further level of what they can do with the data. And we keep saying and emphasizing that metadata is quite important. Even your data is not accessible or you don't want, for some restrictions reasons, your data is not upfront available in the platform you deploy. So your metadata is still remain there for a longer period to give information about what the data is all about, so people can go with the second level of accessing the data. The third concept comes with FAIR is interoperability. So you made your data findable and accessible through these platforms, but also you want it to be interoperable. Like you want your data is integrated with other data or other tools. So you just don't want to throw a data that only you can open it, you can process it, you can work on it. So you want to make it to bring in a unified format that is easily downloadable, using them. It's easy to use most common maybe tools to integrate or operate on it. So it kind of uses like some sort of standardized formats when you define the data, you don't want to come up with your own vocabulary. Try to stick with the vocabulary or terminologies around your discipline or your the main field where you produce the data. And of course, you would like to include always metadata. So usually, I guess most of you might be familiar, these formats are like CSV files or JSON files. So you just provide along. So usually these files are easy to be read by any machine processing. But also when you want to visually just like do your humanly visual revising, so it's also easily understandable. It's not just like symbols or shapes, and just you can open it with any not PETS readers or any text file reading tools, and you can just look at inside of those. So that gives a lot of like flexibility for your users of your data to be able to also operate on your data. So this is one of the important practice that you have to make sure you provide it if you want to make your data usable, easily accessible. And the last principle is reusable. So again, here you want your data to be reused by others, so which means that you want to as much as provide descriptions around your data, so it can be easily understandable what is inside, what is missing, or what is provided. Of course, again, this comes with also providing a licensing around, so people would know exactly what kind of usage rights they have with the data. So you want to, again, provide detailed provenance and identifiers around it. And again, even though we want to make our data universally agreeable, accessible, but some domains comes with their own requirements and necessities to pack or create the data around. So you also must follow these community standards to make it at least understandable, accessible for your own community in the end. So again, these are not rules, or these are just principles or best practices. It's always keeps evolving, developing, because even today we heard so many different ideas and so many different practices. It shows that there is so much improvement still. There's so much room for improvements to make data sets still open data or open data sets more accessible for everyone. So, and not to forget that fair data, not necessarily open data. These practices can be applicable to closed data too, in your institutions or in your own community. You can still follow those practices to make data sets more standardized and easily readable and accessible. And not all data is there, we can call them, is fair yet. So still there is a lot to learn, a lot to implement. And of course, we would understand that like implementing all these practices takes time and a lot of understanding itself and a lot of like effort. And usually, unfortunately, in the especially academia and research world, we are always on a timeline. We always have to like as much as data collection comes with a lot of like difficulties or challenges along time, like we have to produce outputs, we have to, the publication. So these kind of practices to be like nicely put together requires also yet another time frame or efforts that usually are not recognized or encouraged or incentivized by the organizations, so which also makes it challenging to follow the best practices time to time. So how to apply FAIR principles? I guess we have a common next cohort, I believe, is about this particularly about this topic. So as we mentioned, like making the data open, you have to have a good plan and understanding what's ahead and what's the stage waiting for you. And of course, applying FAIR principles also comes with its own yet another levels of this perfecting or following the structural needs to accompany your data. So that's why it's always good to have a good data management plan and a team around it, and define roles for every members of the team, so you can work in a more supported manner than rather than you just as by yourself take every single responsibility, which is a big task to follow. So okay, so I guess this one is the one of the last exercise. So we wanted to think of any example when you think the data is not fair, like when yes, there is an open data, we found it suits exactly what we look for, but it doesn't follow a fair principle. So what would be the the examples that you think about it, and how do you think this kind of missing and lacking aspects can be fixed? So I guess for this, again, we thought of breaking you all into the separate rooms and groups, and you might discuss among yourselves, so you can hear more from each other's practices and challenges. And please use from a pad to just your type your ideas as you go along the discussions. We loved reading them so far. Thank you.
The rooms are already opened. Oh, I'm going to. I had already forgotten. Thank you. Welcome back. I think we're all here already. How were your discussions?
There's lots of action already on the Frama pad, but if you want to unmute and just give us a quick gist of your discussions, that would be also super lovely. Either way, we are all ears and eyes to hear your thoughts.
So in our group, we talked about several things, but one major thing I want to highlight here is facing the challenge of undiscoverable data because of a specific location you are happens to be something very serious out there. So the data is in existence, but it's undiscoverable because you're not given access based on your region.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, recently my Play Store has been doing that to me as well. Please go ahead. I see a raised hand.
Pressure.
Hi.
Yeah, so one of the things we discussed, I don't know if it counts as data not being fair. It's also I noticed that there is AI everywhere and everybody using AI these days, right? So I noticed recently I was reading a research paper and I noticed that when you speak a language, like I'm from Nigeria, right? When I type to the AI in my local language, I type in the AI with my local language, it burns more tokens. So if I am on $20 plan, I get to burn more tokens because I am talking to the AI in my language and not English, right? And that's part of the things that we discussed in my group. I think I shared that with the team. So, and this is largely because the models that is not trained on the data, which is the language, local language data, right? Yeah. So yeah.
There is not
something we
Really
discussed.
interesting.
Yeah.
I think that the idea of creating, I call it baby models, training just for a specific task, I think that's where we would head towards more personalized, localized, to the need, what is needed, not using the broad ecosystem and essentially burning tokens. You got that right.
Yeah, more like small language models, something like that.
Yeah.
But it's valid even in my field. I keep giving the examples from this is my day-to-day involvement, but most of the brain research also comes from a lot of Western brain data, right? And so even within the Western brain data, for example, most of the autism research or comes from like it's wherever the data is accessible. Like it's just unfortunately the results not necessarily like span whole entire population, and it's always like we always have to consume any information out there with a kind of this in our mind that how and think that how would it apply if it was trained on my own community specifics. Yeah, unfortunately, that's always the critical thinking comes into way when you have. But this is also that's why it's important to expose ourselves to other ways of open data. Also open this like doors for us, like to understand how others handle or collect or manipulate or process the data, and how we can get these practices, learn from them, and apply in our own ways of doing in our own. They might not be fully amazing in the way that they do things, right? How we can improve upon what they do and how they handle the data. So it's or the practices they do. So I guess still it's a challenge, but it's also a nice challenge to think that how we can get over it. So maybe if you look at the challenge this way, yeah, it might be more at least we can get enthusiastic rather than we more.
Right. I mean, overall, we see the sentiments from your written thoughts as well, that there is a lot of scope again how we can improve and make it like actually fair, not just in words. We are reaching close to the end of the session, so we are gonna go to the slides and see.
Okay, so shall I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much again. Like we definitely again like what you write there completely resonates with all of our experiences, and but not to forget that open science is an evolving process, and this what we do here is super important, super valuable, because these kind of points that has been raised makes all this open science or communicative or contributive science to grow faster and better rather than developed in silos by some group of people that thinks they know the best. So that's why what we are doing here is the essential of what exactly how science should be communicated and evolving forward. And just to wrap up around again, what do we mean by fair and what practices we should be following when we create the data and make it open. So we should be following or requesting whenever we request using a data, or whenever we want to put our data openly out there. We should be following the rules that easily accessibility, so others can easily find your data. This comes with like again this identifiers to alongside with your data, but also any metadata you can provide to make those informations easily followed and found out. And again, it's important to have these identifiers, any kind of information that gives like especially licensing information that gives the indication of what people can benefit from your data. And of course, depending on the site or processes you are sharing your data, if it's institutional level, if there's an application process, if that application process requires some certain seniority, or any student or anyone can apply and get the data. So all these needs to be provided fully and easily foundable, rather than a lot of email exchange with no replies. And so you would like to provide all these process defined well and out there. And again, depending on your field or universal like terminologies, it's good to follow the standardization around structuring your data, but also describing your data. And again, sharing the preferred open file formats that is acceptable in your own field. And just always keep in mind that data sharing or data accessing open data is a process that is not just you looked for once and you just found and downloaded. It's just like a lot of iterations to understand or how you share your data or how you access the data, how it's useful for you, or if you share a data, how it's useful for others, and how you can make it easily beneficial for the people who's going to use it as a secondary user. So and these are more or less like principles that tries to kind of guarantee that this practices helps us to like do this in a more right way in the consensus the way that everyone has a consensus on. So there are more resources out there. I mean, you might think that I created this slides, but it's like combination of so much work has been already put by all these amazing people out there. It's just like, this is also one example of open data. So that the slides were like production of many other slides or many other resources. I was able to have a great privileged access to, but I've done already others. But there are more resources out there. Please go and check. You have access to these slides. You will find so many like amazing guidelines and visualizations around what our imagination of open science or open data and or these practices and how they should be put in practice. So there's so much things to read and consume. We would strongly recommend you all to take a look. And I would like to thank you for your attention, contributions. This has been amazing. I learned a lot already by myself. Hope you feel the same. And if you have any more further questions, please don't hesitate to share either now or in the Frama pad. We would be happy to guide you as much as possible. And as Sarah already mentioned, so we will be doing those mentoring sessions. I will be also happy to meet with you there if you have further questions later on about your own practices and things you want to discuss. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Isil. I think I speak from everyone to say that this was an amazing training. All resources are already there on Zenodo, openly available. You have the links in the Framapad. Thank you so much. And yes, most of the images are from the Turing Way, that they are also an open resource that you can find on Zenodo. So it is all cited there and referenced there in the slides. So feel free to reuse them and spread the joy and the knowledge. I will be here a couple more minutes more in case anyone else has any question about the program or anything in particular. But if not, I just wanted to remind you again about the coaching sessions. Next cohort call will be next Tuesday, and we will be working on open tools and resources. You will be meeting with Gracieli, and that is going to be a very useful one as well. So be sure not to miss it. But for now, thank you so much for coming. And yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Bye. Thank you.